Hello everyone. Welcome to our animated philosophy series where we explore timeless concepts in a modern context. Today we are going to dive into Husserl's concept of the Lifeworld, or as he calls it, the Lebenswelt. Now, you might ask, what is the Lifeworld and why does it matter? Well, imagine your day-to-day experience. You wake up, you feel the texture of the bed under you, the light streaming through the window, you check the time, maybe groan a little because you're late. All of that, the textures, feelings, perceptions, and even the time itself, make up your life world. It's your world as you live and experience it, not as a scientist or philosopher might analyze it. Let's break it down step by step. Husserl's concept of the life world is deeply personal. It's the world as we experience it before we filter it through science, abstract thinking, or theory. Think about this. When you walk through a park, you don't experience it as an abstract collection of atoms or as measurable data. No, you experience the warmth of the sun, the sound of the birds, the feeling of peace or stress, depending on your mood. That's the life world. It's the reality as it appears to you, lived through your senses, emotions, and thoughts. Now, how does this differ from the scientific worldview? Science aims to measure, quantify, and explain the world in objective terms. When science looks at time, for instance, it sees something precise, something that can be measured in seconds, minutes, hours. But how do we experience time in our life world? Time can feel drastically different depending on what we're going through. When you're waiting for something important, a minute feels like an eternity. But when you're deeply immersed in a hobby or conversation with a friend, hours can fly by without you even noticing. The clock may say an hour passed, but your experience of that hour could be entirely different. This is the essence of the life world. It's fluid, lived, and deeply connected to how we experience reality moment by moment. Husserl argued that science, for all its precision, misses something vital about our human experience because it overlooks this lived, personal dimension. While science gives us an objective framework, the life world gives us something deeper. It gives us meaning, context, and richness. Let's think about space next. Scientifically, space can be mapped out and measured with perfect accuracy. You can measure the distance from one side of a room to the other, or calculate how far apart two cities are. But our lived experience of space isn't just about those measurements, is it? Imagine you're in a room waiting for an interview and your anxiety is spiking. Suddenly, that room might feel claustrophobic, like the walls are closing in on you. Or consider the opposite. When you're completely absorbed in a creative project, you might barely notice the room around you at all. It kind of disappears from your attention. The space feels different depending on your emotional and mental state. This is another key part of the life world. It's shaped by our emotions, perceptions, and culture. Think about how different cultures experience and interpret time. In some cultures, time is very strict, every second counts, and punctuality is essential. In other cultures, time is more fluid. Being late isn't seen as disrespectful, but rather as part of a more relaxed approach to life. So, even something as seemingly objective as time is deeply colored by the life world we inhabit. Phenomenology, Husserl's broader philosophical project, is all about turning our attention back to this lived experience. It's not that Husserl dismisses science, he doesn't. But he says, look, before we analyze the world through scientific or theoretical lenses, we need to return to how we experience it firsthand. This is what he calls a return to the things themselves. The life world is the foundation, the ground on which everything else, scientific knowledge, theories, abstract thinking, builds. Let's bring in a real-world example to illustrate this further. Have you ever traveled to a foreign country? Suddenly, things that seem so obvious in your own culture, like how people greet each other, how they structure their day, or how they even perceive space, feel entirely different. That's because the life world isn't a universal, one-size-fits-all experience. It's shaped by culture, by history, by the values and customs that surround us. When you step into a new cultural context, your life world shifts and you begin to see the world through new eyes. Here's another example. Think about how the digital age has changed our life world. Before the rise of smartphones, we experienced communication in a very different way. Conversations were slower, more face-to-face. Now, our life world is shaped by the constant presence of technology. We experience time differently because we're always connected, always online. Space feels different too. Distance no longer feels as significant when you can instantly message someone halfway across the globe. Our life world today is saturated with digital experiences, which changes the way we relate to the world and each other. Husserl's concept of the life world encourages us to think about how our experiences are shaped not just by individual perceptions but by the broader cultural, emotional, and historical context we live in. Phenomenology, as a method, helps us become more aware of these dimensions and challenges us to reflect on them. To wrap up, the life world is the world as we experience it before it's dissected by scientific categories. It's not something that can be reduced to numbers or data points. It's personal, lived, and deeply human. Husserl believed that if we lose sight of this life world, we lose sight of what makes life meaningful. Science is important, of course, but phenomenology helps us rediscover the richness of our everyday experiences and reminds us that reality isn't just out there in some objective sense. It's also deeply interwoven with how we live it, feel it, and make sense of it. Thank you for learning with us. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more insights into similar echoes.